The paddle wheel churned through ice-rimmed waters as Grace Jensen clutched her worn carpetbag tighter, watching Missouri's frozen shoreline slip past like a memory she desperately wanted to forget. December 1878 had come hard and unforgiving, and the steamboat Northern Star fought against the current with every rotation of its great wheel. Grace stood on the passenger deck, her black morning dress doing little to shield her from the bitter wind that swept across the water. She had purchased the cheapest passage available, spending nearly every dollar she had left after burying her husband 3 weeks prior. The consumption had taken him slowly, painfully, and now she was heading north to Montana Territory, to a brother she had not seen in 6 years, carrying nothing but hope that he would remember her kindness when their parents passed and take her in. The other passengers had retreated to the relative warmth of the interior cabin, but Grace could not bear the pitying looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when she drew near. Better the cold than their sympathy. She was 23 years old and already a widow, her dreams of a quiet life in St. Louis shattered by disease and debt. The creditors had taken everything, even the simple wedding ring her husband had placed on her finger just 2 years before. "You will freeze out here if you are not careful." Grace turned to find a young man approaching, his boots steady on the ice-slicked deck, despite the boat's constant rocking. He wore the rough wool clothing of a deckhand, his coat patched at the elbows and his hat pulled low against the wind. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, warm brown and filled with genuine concern rather than pity. "I needed air," Grace said, her voice barely carrying over the sound of the paddle wheel and the rushing water. "Air is one thing, frostbite is another." He moved to stand beside her at the railing, keeping a respectful distance. "Name is Cole Quinlan. I work the deck, help keep this old boat moving. Grace Jensen." She hesitated before adding, "I appreciate your concern, but I will be fine." Cole was quiet for a moment, studying the northern horizon. He looked to be perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and the weathered complexion of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. There was something solid about him, something that reminded Grace of the oak trees back home, deeply rooted and unbending. "You are heading north," Cole said finally. It was not a question. "To Montana Territory. My brother has a claim near Virginia City. Montana in winter." Cole shook his head slowly. "I know where north leads you, Miss Jensen. I worked the goldfields up there for 2 seasons before I took this job. It is beautiful country, but it is hard, especially for someone traveling alone." Grace stiffened, her pride flaring despite her exhaustion. "I can manage." "I do not doubt your strength," Cole said quickly, and something in his tone made her believe him. "But knowing what lies ahead makes the journey easier. How far north are you planning to go?" "The Northern Star only travels to Council Bluffs," Grace admitted. "From there I will take a stagecoach west." Cole's expression darkened. "In December, Miss Jensen, the stage lines stop running when the snow gets deep. You might be stranded in Council Bluffs until spring." The words hit Grace like a physical blow. She had not considered that possibility. Her planning had extended only as far as purchasing her ticket and writing to her brother. The letter might not even reach him for weeks, months perhaps. She gripped the railing harder, feeling the rough would bite into her palms even through her thin gloves. "I see," she said quietly. They stood in silence as the boat pushed northward. The sun was setting early, as it did in winter, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Grace tried to think, to plan, but her mind felt as frozen as the river. She had nowhere else to go. Her husband's family had made it clear they wanted nothing to do with her, blaming her somehow for his death. Her own parents were long buried. The brother in Montana was her only hope. There might be another way, Cole said. His voice was thoughtful, measured. I have friends in Council Bluffs. Good people. They might know of someone heading west who could use company on the journey. Trappers, traders, that sort. It is not uncommon for small groups to travel together in winter for safety. I have very little money, Grace said. The admission burned, but honesty seemed the only option. Money is not everything in the territories, Cole replied. Someone who can cook, mend clothes, tend wounds, those skills have value. A woman alone might not fare well, but a woman traveling with others, contributing to the group, that is different. Grace turned to look at him properly for the first time. His face was open, honest, without any of the calculation she had learned to recognize in men who saw a widow as easy prey. Why are you helping me? Cole was quiet for a long moment, his gaze returning to the darkening horizon. My sister made a similar journey 3 years ago. She was running from an ugly situation, heading to Oregon to start fresh. She died of fever on the trail. If someone had helped her, given her advice, looked out for her even a little, she might still be alive. He cleared his throat. I cannot help her now, but I can try to help you. The simple honesty of his words brought tears to Grace's eyes, the first she had allowed herself since leaving St. Louis. She blinked them back quickly, not wanting to seem weak, but her voice was thick when she spoke. I am sorry about your sister. So am I. Cole straightened, his practical nature reasserting itself. But standing out here dwelling on it will not change anything. Come inside, Miss Jensen. Have some coffee. The deck crew gets better food than the passengers, and Cookie always makes too much. You look like you have not eaten properly in days. Grace wanted to refuse, to maintain her independence and dignity, but her stomach growled at the mention of food, betraying her. She had indeed barely eaten, stretching her meager funds as far as possible. I do not want to impose. You are not. Come on, before we both turn into ice sculptures. The crew's quarters were cramped but warm, heated by a small stove that glowed red in the dimness. 3 other deckhands sat around a battered table, playing cards and drinking coffee from tin mugs. They looked up when Cole entered with Grace, their expressions curious but not unwelcoming. Found this lady freezing on the passenger deck, Cole announced. Figure she could use some of Cookie's stew before she wastes away. A large man with a salt and pepper beard stood from the table, wiping his hands on his apron. Any friend of Cole's is welcome at my table. Sit yourself down, miss. Stew is hot and there is plenty. Grace found herself guided to a wooden crate that served as a stool, a bowl of thick stew pressed into her hands. The smell alone nearly made her weep. Venison, potatoes, carrots, all swimming in rich brown gravy. She ate slowly, trying to maintain some semblance of manners, but the men around her were not fooled. When was the last time you ate? Cookie asked, his voice gentle. Yesterday morning, Grace admitted. I had some bread and cheese. Yesterday morning, Cookie repeated, shaking his head. He ladled another helping into her bowl before she could protest. Eat up. You will need your strength for whatever is ahead. As Grace ate, Cole explained her situation to the other men. They listened with the focused attention of people who understood hardship, who knew what it meant to be alone and desperate in an unforgiving world. When Cole finished, the oldest of the deckhands, a grizzled man named Samuel, spoke up. I know a trapper heading west from Council Bluffs in about 2 weeks. Name is Dutch Herman. He is a good man, trustworthy, takes supplies into the mountain camps during winter. He might be willing to take on an extra passenger, especially if she can make herself useful. That is worth pursuing, Cole agreed. He looked at Grace. You would need to stay in Council Bluffs until he is ready to leave. You have enough funds for lodging, Grace calculated quickly in her head. Perhaps, if I am very careful. There is a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, Samuel continued. She is fair with her prices and she likes having women around. Tell her Samuel from the Northern Star sent you. She will treat you right. The conversation continued, the men offering advice and suggestions with a practicality that Grace found both overwhelming and deeply comforting. They spoke of winter travel, of what to expect in the mountains, of how to tell good people from bad. Cole said little, but Grace noticed he was listening intently, filing away every piece of information. When the meal was finished and Grace had thanked them multiple times, Cole walked her back toward the passenger cabin. The temperature had dropped further and stars were emerging in the clear winter sky. You did not have to do all this, Grace said as they paused at the door. I know, Cole replied, but I wanted to. I do not know how to repay such kindness. Survive, Cole said simply. Make it to your brother. Build a good life. That is repayment enough. Grace nodded, not trusting her voice. She slipped inside into the crowded warmth of the passenger cabin and found her narrow bunk, but sleep was slow to come. She kept thinking about Cole's quiet competence, the way he had helped without expecting anything in return. In the harsh world she had been navigating, such goodness felt almost miraculous. The Northern Star continued its journey northward, fighting the current and the cold. Grace spent the next 2 days mostly in the passenger cabin, conserving her energy and her warmth. But each evening, as the sun set, she found herself drawn to the deck, and each evening Cole appeared shortly after, as if he had been watching for her. They talked as the boat churned through the darkening waters. Cole spoke of his time in the goldfields, of the hard work and harder men, of the beauty of the mountains and the brutal reality of mining. Grace told him about her brief marriage, about her husband's gradual decline, about the life she had imagined that would never come to pass. With each conversation, she felt some of the weight lifting from her shoulders. On the third evening, as they stood at the railing watching ice floes drift past, Cole said, I have been thinking. About what? About your situation. About mine. He turned to face her, his expression serious. My contract with the Northern Star ends when we reach Council Bluffs. I was planning to head back to the goldfields anyway, maybe try my luck in a different camp. What if I traveled west with you and this trapper Samuel mentioned? Grace stared at him. You would do that. I would have a reason to go west regardless, Cole pointed out. This just gives me a purpose beyond my own prospects. 2 people traveling are safer than 1, and if something goes wrong, if the trapper does not work out or if the journey gets difficult, you would have someone watching your back. But you barely know me. I know enough. Cole's voice was firm. I know you are brave enough to make this journey alone, which means you are probably too brave for your own good. I know you have been through hell recently and you are still standing. I know that you deserve to make it to your brother safely. Sometimes that is enough. Grace felt something shift in her chest, some frozen place beginning to thaw. I cannot pay you. I am not asking for payment. I am asking if you will accept the help. She thought about pride, about independence, about all the reasons she should refuse. Then she thought about the long winter ahead, about the unknown dangers between Council Bluffs and Montana territory, about dying alone like Cole's sister had. Yes, she said quietly. I will accept the help, thank you. Cole smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer, more open. Good. Then we will figure this out together. The Northern Star reached Council Bluffs on a gray morning, the sky heavy with the promise of snow. The town sprawled along the eastern bank of the Missouri River, a jumble of wooden buildings and muddy streets. It was larger than Grace had expected, full of people heading west or making their living off those who were. Cole helped Grace with her carpetbag, guiding her through the chaos of the docks. True to Samuel's word, Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was clean and affordable, run by a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who sized up Grace in seconds. "Samuel sent you, did he, Mrs. Patterson said, her hands on her hips. "That old river rat has a good heart. How long will you be staying?" "2 weeks, perhaps a bit longer," Grace replied. "I am waiting to travel west with a trapper. In winter, you are either very brave or very desperate, Mrs. Patterson's gaze softened slightly. "Or both. Come on, then. I have a room on the second floor. It is small but warm, and I keep a good table." Cole waited while Grace arranged her lodging, then walked her back downstairs. "I need to settle my own affairs and find this Dutch Herman that Samuel mentioned. Will you be all right here?" "I will be fine," Grace assured him. "Mrs. Patterson seems kind in her way." "I will come by tomorrow," Cole promised. "We will make plans." He left, and Grace felt his absence like a chill wind. She had known him only a few days, but already she had come to rely on his steady presence. The thought troubled her. She could not afford to become dependent on anyone, not when her future was so uncertain. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and waiting. Cole found Dutch Herman, a large, bearded man who spoke English with a thick German accent. Dutch agreed to take them west in his supply wagon, provided they could pay their share of expenses and help with the work. The price was steep but manageable if Grace and Cole pooled their resources. During the waiting period, Grace helped Mrs. Patterson around the boarding house, earning her keep and a small reduction in her room cost. She cooked, cleaned, mended clothes for the other boarders. The work was familiar and comforting, giving her days structure and purpose. And each evening, Cole came by to share dinner and discuss plans. They learned each other's histories in fragments and pieces. Cole had grown up on a small farm in Kansas, the youngest of 5 children. His father had died when Cole was 12, killed by a falling horse, and his mother had worked herself to death trying to keep the family together. His siblings had scattered to the winds, seeking fortunes or spouses or simply escape. Cole had tried farming, tried working cattle, tried the goldfields. Nothing had quite stuck, but he had learned skills along the way, becoming a man who could turn his hand to almost anything. Grace spoke more freely than she had with anyone since her husband fell ill. She described her childhood in Ohio, the daughter of a shopkeeper who had died of a heart ailment when she was 16. Her mother had followed him a year later, as if she simply could not bear to be parted from him. Grace's brother Michael had gone west immediately after their mother's funeral, seeking adventure and gold. Grace had stayed, working as a seamstress until she met Thomas Jensen, a clerk with kind eyes and gentle manners. "I thought we would have decades together," Grace said one evening as they sat in Mrs. Patterson's parlor, the other boarders gone to bed. "I thought we would have children, grow old, all the ordinary things. When he got sick, I kept believing he would recover. Right up until the end, I believed." "Belief is not a weakness," Cole said. "Loving someone is not a weakness, even when they leave. It feels like weakness when you are left with nothing. You were not left with nothing. You were left with strength and determination and the courage to head into the unknown. Those are not small things, Grace." The use of her first name without the formal Miss Jensen should have felt presumptuous. Instead, it felt natural, as if they had known each other far longer than 2 weeks. Grace found herself watching Cole when he was not looking, noticing the way his hands moved when he talked, the way he listened with his whole attention, the small kindnesses he offered without thinking. She realized with some alarm, becoming attached to him. Worse, she was beginning to care what he thought of her, to dress a bit more carefully when she knew he would visit, to seek out his opinion on matters large and small. It was dangerous territory. She was a widow in mourning, with no prospects and no security. She could not afford to fall for a drifter, no matter how kind or capable he seemed. But her heart, it appeared, had different ideas. The day before their departure, a massive snowstorm hit Council Bluffs. The wind howled down from the north, driving snow sideways and piling drifts against buildings. Dutch Herman came to the boarding house, stomping snow from his boots and shaking his head. "We cannot leave tomorrow," he announced in his heavy accent. "Too dangerous. We wait until the storm passes and the road is clear. Maybe 2 more days, maybe 3. Grace felt frustration rise in her throat. Every delay meant more money spent, their small reserves dwindling, but there was nothing to be done. Nature set its own schedule. Cole must have seen her distress because after Dutch left, he caught her arm gently. "Walk with me, in this storm, just to the kitchen, away from the others." Mrs. Patterson's kitchen was warm and empty, the stove radiating heat. Cole pulled out a chair for Grace, then sat across from her at the work table. "Talk to me," he said. "What is wrong?" "Everything is wrong," Grace burst out, then immediately felt ashamed of her outburst. "I am sorry. I know it could be worse. But every delay costs money, and I am watching my funds drain away. And what if we finally reach Montana and my brother has moved on or does not want me or Grace?" Cole reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "Breathe." She did, pulling in air and forcing herself to calm, but she did not pull her hand away from his. "We will make it," Cole said quietly. "I do not know how yet, but we will figure it out, together." "You keep saying that, but why?" Grace met his eyes. "Why are you doing all this for me?" "Please, I need to understand." Cole was quiet for a long time, his thumb absently rubbing circles on the back of her hand. Finally, he spoke. "When I first saw you on that boat, standing alone in the cold, I saw someone who had lost everything but refused to give up. That kind of strength, that kind of courage, it deserves to be protected. It deserves to succeed." He paused, then continued, his voice softer. "And if I am being completely honest, I saw someone I wanted to know better. Someone who made me think maybe there was more to life than drifting from job to job, place to place." Grace's heart hammered in her chest. "Cole, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know you are in mourning. I know this is complicated. But you asked why, and I wanted to be honest with you. Whatever happens, whether we are friends or something more, or whether we go our separate ways in Montana, I want you to know that meeting you has mattered to me." The words hung in the air between them, significant and terrifying. Grace knew she should pull her hand back, should maintain proper distance, but she did not want to. For the first time since Thomas died, she felt something other than grief and fear. She felt hope. "Meeting you has mattered to me too," she said softly. "More than I expected. More than I think I am ready for." "Then we will go slow," Cole said. "We have a long journey ahead. No need to rush anything." But when Grace went to bed that night, listening to the wind howl outside her window, she knew that her feelings were already far beyond simple friendship. She was falling for Cole Quinlan, this steady cowboy turned deckhand turned traveling companion. It was foolish and impractical and entirely beyond her control. The storm broke on the 3rd day, leaving Council Bluffs buried under 2 feet of fresh snow. The sky cleared to a brilliant blue, the kind of cold that made breath freeze and ears ache. Dutch Herman appeared at the boarding house at dawn, declaring they would leave immediately to take advantage of the clear weather. The wagon was large and sturdy, pulled by 4 massive horses that snorted fog into the freezing air. Dutch had loaded it with supplies for the mining camps: flour, coffee, tools, blankets, whiskey. There was just enough room for Grace and Cole to squeeze in among the cargo, wrapped in buffalo robes against the cold. Mrs. Patterson packed them food for the journey, pressing extra bread and cheese into Grace's hands. "You take care of yourself, girl," she said gruffly. "And you," she pointed at Cole, "you watch out for her." "I will," Cole promised. The journey west was hard beyond anything Grace had imagined. The roads were little more than trails, often obliterated by snow. They traveled slowly, stopping frequently to rest the horses or clear the path. At night, they camped in the open, huddling around fires that never quite seemed warm enough. Dutch proved to be a capable guide but a man of few words. He drove the wagon with grim determination, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for danger or difficult terrain. On the third night, as they sat around the fire, he finally opened up a bit. "You two married?" he asked, gesturing between Grace and Cole with his pipe. "No," Grace said quickly. Dutch puffed thoughtfully. "You should be. Safer for a woman to be married out here. Fewer questions, fewer problems." "I am a widow," Grace explained. "My husband died only recently." "Ah," Dutch nodded sympathetically. "Hard thing. But still, you think about it. This country, it does not care much for propriety, but it cares a lot about survival. Married couple has easier time than a man and woman traveling together unmarried." After Dutch rolled himself in his blankets and began snoring, Cole moved closer to Grace, speaking quietly. "He is not entirely wrong," Cole said. "I have been thinking about it myself. Some of the mining camps, the rough towns, they might give you trouble. If we were married, even if just on paper, it might make things easier." Grace looked at him in the firelight, trying to read his expression. "A marriage of convenience, if that is what you want," Cole said carefully. "Or it could be something more. Grace, I know it has only been a few weeks. I know you are in mourning and we barely know each other. But I also know that what I feel for you is real. I care about you. I want to protect you, but more than that, I want to be with you. Not out of obligation or practicality, but because when I think about the future, I want you in it." Grace's breath caught. "Cole, You do not have to answer now," he said quickly. "Just think about it. We have weeks of travel ahead, but I wanted you to know where I stand." That night, wrapped in her buffalo robe and staring up at the star-filled sky, Grace examined her feelings honestly. She had loved Thomas, truly loved him. But it had been a gentle, comfortable love, built on shared routines and quiet companionship. What she felt for Cole was different, fiercer, built on shared danger and mutual respect. He had seen her at her worst, desperate and grieving, and had chosen to stand beside her. He was steady and kind and capable, but more than that, he made her feel alive in a way she had not felt in a very long time. Was it too soon? Society would certainly say so. She should mourn Thomas for a year at least, probably longer. But out here in the wilderness, with the wind howling and the stars blazing overhead, societal expectations felt distant and irrelevant. This was about survival, yes, but it was also about choosing life over endless grief, about grasping happiness where it could be found. The next morning, as they prepared to continue their journey, Grace pulled Cole aside. "I have been thinking about what you said," she began, her breath frosting in the cold air. "About marriage, about the future." Cole went very still. "And I think Dutch is right that it would be practical. But more than that, I think you are right that this could be something real." Grace took a deep breath. "I care for you, Cole, perhaps more than I should given how little time we have known each other, but my heart does not seem to care about propriety or timing. If you are serious about wanting to build a future together, then I would like to try." The smile that spread across Cole's face was like sunrise. "You mean it." "I do. But slowly, as you said. Let us get to Montana, find my brother, make sure we can actually survive out here. And then, if we still feel the same way, we can make it official." "That sounds perfect." Cole pulled off his glove and extended his hand. "Partners." Grace removed her own glove and shook his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers. "Partners." Dutch watched this exchange with approval. "Good," he said simply. "Now we go. Long way still ahead." The journey continued through snow and cold, through mountain passes that made Grace dizzy with their height, through forests so dense that noon felt like twilight. They saw elk and deer, wolves and eagles. Once, Dutch pointed out the tracks of a mountain lion, but the creature itself remained blessedly unseen. Cole and Grace grew closer with each passing day. They worked together to make camp, to prepare food, to care for the horses. They talked for hours, learning each other's thoughts on everything from religion to politics to what made a good meal. Grace found herself laughing again, really laughing, at Cole's dry observations about their fellow travelers or the absurdities of frontier life. And slowly, carefully, they began to touch more. A hand on the arm, a shoulder pressed close for warmth, fingers intertwined. Nothing improper, nothing that would have scandalized even the strictest observer, but each touch was significant, building connection and affection. 3 weeks into their journey, they reached a small settlement called Montrose, Colorado. It was barely a town, just a handful of buildings huddled in a mountain valley, but it had a store and a rough tavern and, most importantly, shelter from the constant cold. Dutch announced they would rest here for 2 days, giving the horses time to recover and allowing him to conduct some business. Grace and Cole found lodging in the loft above the store, a space they shared with 2 prospectors who smelled of whiskey and old sweat. That evening in the tavern, Grace noticed other women for the first time in weeks. They were mostly rough types, women who worked in the saloons or ran boarding houses, but there was one who stood out. She was perhaps 40, dressed respectably, with a face that spoke of both strength and kindness. The woman approached their table, introducing herself as Martha Chen. "I run a small school here," she explained, "for the children of the miners and settlers. I could not help but overhear that you are heading to Montana Territory." "That is right," Grace confirmed, "to Virginia City." "A difficult journey, especially in winter," Martha said, "but you look like you are managing well." She glanced between Grace and Cole. "Forgive my directness, but are you 2 married?" "Not yet," Cole said, his hand finding Grace's under the table. "But soon, we hope." Martha smiled. "I ask because I am also a justice of the peace, one of the few legally recognized authorities in this region. If you wanted to make things official, I could perform the ceremony. It might make the rest of your journey easier." Grace and Cole looked at each other. They had agreed to wait, to take things slowly, but Martha's offer was practical and sensible. And more than that, Grace realized she wanted it. She wanted to be Cole's wife, wanted to face the future as a team rather than as 2 individuals trying to coordinate. "What do you think?" Cole asked her quietly. "I think we should do it," Grace said. "If you are certain." "I have never been more certain of anything." The wedding took place the next evening in the small room behind the store that served as Martha's school. Dutch stood as witness, looking surprisingly emotional beneath his gruff exterior. There were no flowers, no fancy dress, no gathered family. Just Martha reading from a worn Bible, her voice steady and sure, binding Grace and Cole together in the eyes of God and the law. "Do you, Cole Quinlan, take Grace Jensen as your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward?" "I do," Cole said, his eyes never leaving Grace's face. "And do you, Grace Jensen, take Cole Quinlan as your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward?" Grace felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife. Cole, you may kiss your bride." Cole cupped Grace's face in his hands, his touch gentle, and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and filled with promise. Grace kissed him back, feeling the last of her grief and fear melt away, replaced by hope and love and the determination to build something good from the ashes of her old life. That night, they consummated their marriage in the loft, trying to be quiet with the snoring prospectors nearby. It was awkward and sweet, and nothing like Grace's experiences with Thomas, who had been shy and hesitant in the marriage bed. Cole was confident but gentle, attentive to her responses, making sure she was comfortable and willing. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their blankets, whispering in the darkness. "I love you," Cole said, his lips against her hair. "I know it is fast, but I do." "I love you too," Grace replied, and realized she meant it completely. "I did not think I would ever feel this way again." "You deserve every happiness," Cole told her, "and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." They left Montrose 2 days later, continuing their journey northwest toward Montana Territory. The landscape grew more rugged, more beautiful, more dangerous. They crossed rivers frozen solid enough to support the wagon, climbed passes where one wrong move would send them plummeting into nothingness. Dutch delivered his supplies to several mining camps along the way, small collections of desperate men digging for gold in the frozen earth. At each stop, Grace was treated with a mixture of curiosity and respect. A woman in these camps was a rarity, a married woman even more so. Some of the miners offered to pay her just to cook them a proper meal or mend their clothes. Grace accepted when the price was right, building up their small store of funds. Cole found work too, helping with repairs or heavy labor, always keeping Grace in sight. He had become protective since their marriage, watching for potential threats or dangers. Grace might have found it stifling if it had felt controlling, but it did not. Cole trusted her judgment, valued her opinions, but he also understood the realities of frontier life in a way she was still learning. At one camp, a drunk miner got aggressive with Grace, grabbing her arm and demanding she dance with him. Before she could react, Cole was there, his hand on the miner's wrist, his voice deadly calm. "Let go of my wife." The miner looked between them, saw something in Cole's expression that made him back down. No harm meant, just having fun. Find your fun somewhere else. The incident shook Grace more than she wanted to admit. That night, as they lay in their bedrolls under the wagon, she clung to Cole. "I forget sometimes how dangerous this all is," she admitted. "In Council Bluffs, even on the boat, there were rules, society, consequences. Out here, it feels like anything could happen." "That is why we watch out for each other," Cole said. "That is why we stay together." "I will not let anything happen to you, Grace, I promise." "You cannot promise that. None of us can control everything." "No, but I can control my own actions, and I can promise that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe." Grace believed him. She had to. The alternative was giving in to fear, and she had not come this far to surrender now. They reached Virginia City in early February, nearly 2 months after leaving St. Louis. The mining town sprawled across the mountainside, a chaotic collection of buildings in various states of construction or decay. Thousands of people lived here, drawn by the promise of gold, creating a community that was rough and lawless but also vibrantly alive. Finding Michael Jensen proved more difficult than Grace had anticipated. The first 3 people she asked had never heard of him. The fourth, a bartender at one of the larger saloons, finally provided information. "Mike Jensen. Sure, I know him. Got a claim about 5 miles north of here, up in the hills. Does not come to town much these days." Grace and Cole, with Dutch's help, found the claim the next day. It was a modest operation, just Michael and one partner working a small stream. Grace's brother was thinner than she remembered, weathered by years of outdoor work, but his face lit up when he recognized her. "Grace." "My God, I thought I would never see you again." They embraced, and Grace felt some deep part of her relax. She had made it. Against all odds, through cold and hardship and danger, she had reached her destination. Michael invited them into his small cabin, offering coffee and stew. As they ate, Grace explained what had brought her west: Thomas's death, her poverty, her desperate journey. Michael listened with growing distress. "I am so sorry," he said when she finished. "If I had known, I would have sent money, helped somehow. I have been so focused on the claim, on trying to strike it rich, that I lost track of everything else." "You could not have known," Grace assured him. "I only wrote a few weeks ago. The letter probably has not even reached you yet." Michael turned his attention to Cole, his expression assessing. "And you married my sister along the way." "I did," Cole said steadily. "In Montrose, performed by a legal justice of the peace. I know how it looks, but I love Grace. I will take care of her." "He already has been taking care of me," Grace interjected. "Cole is the reason I made it here safely. Without him, I would probably be stranded in Council Bluffs or worse." Michael studied them both, then nodded slowly. "All right. I believe you. And Grace, you always had good judgment about people, even when we were kids. If you chose him, he must be worth choosing." "He is," Grace said firmly, reaching for Cole's hand. "Well then, welcome to the family, Cole." Michael extended his hand and Cole shook it. "Now, what are your plans? You are welcome to stay here if you want, though I will warn you that mining is hard work and rarely profitable." "I have done mining before," Cole said, "but I was thinking maybe something different. Grace is a talented seamstress and cook. I can work with my hands, build things, fix things. Maybe Virginia City needs those skills more than it needs another prospector." "You might be right," Michael agreed. "The town is growing fast. People need services, not just gold." Over the next few days, Grace and Cole explored Virginia City, taking its measure. What they found was a community desperate for stability. Yes, there were saloons and gambling halls and all the rough entertainments of a mining town. But there were also families, women trying to create homes in impossible circumstances, children who needed schooling and normalcy. Grace saw the opportunity immediately. "We could open a boarding house," she said to Cole as they walked the muddy streets. "A respectable place, clean and well run. There must be dozens of men who would pay for a good meal and a proper bed. And I could do carpentry on the side," Cole added. "Building furniture, repairing structures. I saw at least 5 buildings that look like they might collapse in the next strong wind." They discussed it with Michael that evening. He was enthusiastic, even offering to help with the initial investment. "I have some gold dust saved up," he said. "Not enough to make me rich, but enough to help you get started. Call it payment for all the times you took care of me when we were kids." "Michael, I cannot take your savings." "It is an investment, not a gift," Michael insisted. "When your boarding house is successful, you can pay me back, with interest if you like." It took 3 months to make it happen, 3 months of hard work, negotiation, and determination. They found a building on the edge of town, sturdy but run down. Cole spent weeks repairing it, replacing rotted boards and shoring up the foundation, while Grace cleaned and sewed curtains and planned menus. Michael helped, as did Dutch, who had decided to spend the rest of winter in Virginia City before heading back east. Other people contributed too, sensing that Grace and Cole were trying to build something good. A miner donated a stove. A merchant sold them supplies at cost. A woman who ran a laundry offered advice on managing a household business. By May 1879, the Mountain View boarding house opened its doors. Grace had 8 rooms to rent, a large kitchen, and a dining room that could seat 20. Cole had built most of the furniture himself, simple but sturdy pieces that would withstand years of use. The business was successful from the start. Mining camps were full of men who missed home, who craved the comfort of a clean bed and a well-cooked meal. Grace charged fair prices and maintained high standards. No fighting, no gambling, no ladies of ill repute. Those who wanted that kind of entertainment could find it elsewhere. Her establishment was for men who wanted peace and respectability. Cole's carpentry business grew alongside the boarding house. He had a reputation for honest work and fair prices, and in a town where many tradesmen cut corners, that reputation was valuable. He hired an apprentice, a young man named Timothy who had come west seeking his fortune but found he had no talent for mining. Grace and Cole fell into a rhythm, their lives busy but satisfying. They woke early and worked late, but they worked together, building something lasting. In the evenings, after the guests had been fed and the day's chores completed, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about their dreams for the future. "You ever regret it?" Grace asked one evening in July. "Marrying me so quickly, tying yourself to this life." Cole pulled her closer, his arm around her shoulders. "Never. Not for a single moment. This life, our life, it is everything I wanted without knowing I wanted it. Even the hard parts, the long hours, the difficult guests, the constant work." "Especially the hard parts," Cole said, "because we are doing them together. Grace, before I met you, I was drifting. I had skills and strength but no purpose. You gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to build instead of just survive." Grace leaned into him, content. "You gave me the same. After Thomas died, I thought my life was over. I thought I would just exist, going through motions. But you showed me I could still have joy, still have love, still have dreams." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. Stars began to emerge, the same stars Grace had watched during those long nights of travel. But now she was watching them from her own porch, beside her husband, in a life they had built together. In September, Grace discovered she was pregnant. The realization came slowly. A missed monthly course followed by morning sickness and unusual fatigue. She told Cole one evening after their guests had retired, her hands shaking slightly with nervousness and excitement. Cole's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down with concern. "Are you all right? Should you be working so hard? We need to get a doctor, make sure everything is fine." "Cole, calm down," Grace laughed. "Women have been having babies forever. I am perfectly healthy. But yes, we should probably find a midwife or doctor who can help when the time comes." The pregnancy progressed normally, though Grace found the work more tiring as she grew larger. Cole insisted on hiring additional help, a young woman named Ellen who had recently arrived in Virginia City with her husband. Ellen was grateful for the work and quickly became invaluable, taking over many of the physical tasks that Grace could no longer manage. Michael visited frequently, excited about becoming an uncle. He had given up on his claim, accepting that he was never going to strike it rich, and had taken a job working for a larger mining operation. It was steady work with steady pay, and he seemed happier than Grace had seen him in years. "I think I needed the dream more than the reality," Michael admitted one afternoon as they sat in the boarding house kitchen. "The dream of gold, of becoming wealthy, it gave me purpose after our parents died. But the reality of mining is just hard, tedious work. This, what you and Cole have built, this seems more valuable than any gold strike." "It certainly feels more real," Grace agreed, one hand resting on her swollen belly. "We know what we have earned. There is satisfaction in that. Grace went into labor on a cold March night in 1880. Cole stayed by her side through the long hours, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. The midwife they had hired, an experienced woman named Mrs. Fletcher, worked with calm efficiency. Michael paced downstairs, drinking coffee and wearing a hole in the floor. At dawn, Grace gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Michael Quinlan, honoring both Grace's late first husband and her brother. Cole cried when he held his son for the first time, tears running unashamedly down his face. "He is perfect," Cole whispered. "Grace, you are amazing." "I love you so much." "I love you too," Grace said, exhausted but happy. "Our little family." Life with a baby was chaotic. Thomas was a good child, healthy and generally happy, but he demanded constant attention. Grace found herself running the boarding house with the baby strapped to her back, cooking one-handed while nursing, catching sleep in brief, scattered moments. Cole was a devoted father, taking over care whenever he could, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. Their guests, rough miners and tradesmen, were surprisingly helpful. More than once, Grace returned to the kitchen to find a grizzled prospector rocking her baby and singing a lullaby in a language she did not recognize. The boarding house continued to thrive. By the time Thomas was 6 months old, Grace had a waiting list for rooms. She and Cole discussed expanding, maybe buying the adjacent building, but decided to wait. They had enough work as it was, enough to keep them busy and prosperous without overwhelming them. Thomas grew quickly, learning to sit up, then crawl, then walk. He was a curious child, getting into everything, charming everyone he met. The boarding house guests spoiled him terribly, carving him toys and bringing him treats. Cole taught him to hammer nails before he could properly talk, patient with his son's clumsy efforts. When Thomas was 2, Grace became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was more difficult. She was sick frequently, exhausted constantly. Cole hired more help, taking over more of the business operations, refusing to let Grace push herself too hard. Their daughter, Sarah Grace Quinlan, was born in November 1882. She came early, small but fierce, with a set of lungs that could wake the entire boarding house. Grace was terrified during those first few weeks, as Sarah struggled to nurse and seemed too fragile to survive. But the baby proved tougher than she looked, eventually thriving and growing into a strong, determined child. The years passed, each one bringing new challenges and joys. The boarding house became an institution in Virginia City, known for its cleanliness, good food, and welcoming atmosphere. Cole's carpentry business expanded, eventually becoming one of the largest in the region. They trained apprentices, hired workers, became employers and community leaders. Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved books and numbers, showing no interest in mining or carpentry. Cole was fine with that, encouraging his son's education, saving money to send him to a proper school when he was old enough. Sarah was the opposite, a wild child who wanted to do everything her father did, climbing ladders and stealing tools, her dresses constantly torn and dirty. Grace and Cole's love deepened with time, weathering the inevitable disagreements and stresses of married life. They argued about money, about how to raise the children, about business decisions. But they always came back together, always remembered what they had built and why it mattered. On their 5th anniversary, Cole surprised Grace with a gold ring to replace the simple band he had bought her in Montrose. It was delicate and beautiful, with a small diamond that must have cost him dearly. "You did not need to do this," Grace said, tears in her eyes as he slipped it onto her finger. "I wanted to," Cole replied. "I wanted you to have something beautiful, something that shows how much you mean to me." Cole Quinlan, I would have loved you just the same without any ring at all. I know, but let me spoil you occasionally. Grace kissed him, deep and sweet, reminded once again of how lucky she was, how far they had come from that frozen riverboat deck where they first met. In 1885, Michael married a widow named Catherine who ran a restaurant in Virginia City. The wedding was a joyous affair, the biggest social event Grace and Cole had hosted at the boarding house. Thomas, now 5, was the ring bearer. Sarah, 3 and impossible to control, scattered flowers with more enthusiasm than Grace, making the guests laugh. Catherine brought her own daughter into the marriage, a quiet girl named Emma who was about Thomas's age. The two children became fast friends, then inseparable companions. Grace and Cole exchanged knowing looks, wondering if they were watching the beginning of something that would last a lifetime. The boarding house faced challenges as Virginia City's mining boom began to slow. Some businesses closed, people moved away seeking opportunities elsewhere. But Grace and Cole adapted, lowering their prices slightly, offering more services, maintaining their reputation for quality. They survived when others failed, their solid foundation and community goodwill carrying them through difficult times. In 1887, Cole's mother, who he had not seen in over a decade, tracked him down through a series of letters and inquiries. She was living in Oregon, elderly and ill, wanting to see her youngest son before she died. Cole made the journey alone, not wanting to subject Grace and the children to the difficult travel. He was gone for 6 weeks, and Grace missed him desperately. She had grown so accustomed to his steady presence, his quiet competence, that the boarding house felt empty without him. When he returned, thinner and sad, having buried his mother but reconciled with some of his scattered siblings, Grace held him tight and thanked God for his safe return. "I never want to be apart that long again," she told him. "Neither do I," Cole agreed. "Whatever time we have left, I want to spend it together." The children continued to grow. Thomas, at 9, was reading at a level far beyond his years and showing remarkable aptitude for mathematics. Cole and Grace hired a tutor, a retired school teacher who had come west for his health. Under Mr. Harrison's guidance, Thomas flourished, dreaming of attending university back east. Sarah, at 7, was still wild but beginning to show signs of the woman she would become. She had inherited her mother's determination and her father's practical skills. She could hammer a nail straight, ride a horse fearlessly, and out-argue any adult who tried to tell her what she could or could not do because she was a girl. In 1889, when Grace was 34 and Cole 36, they sat down to take stock of their lives. The boarding house was paid off, profitable, and could essentially run itself with the staff they had trained. Cole's carpentry business was equally successful. They had savings, investments, property. Their children were healthy and thriving. By any measure, they had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. "You ever think about that riverboat?" Grace asked one evening as they sat on their porch, a ritual they had maintained through all the years. "About how unlikely it was that we met, that we ended up here." "All the time," Cole admitted. "If the Northern Star had left a day earlier or later, if I had not gone on deck at that exact moment, if you had stayed inside where it was warm, none of this would exist. Do you believe in fate?" Cole considered the question seriously. "I believe in choices. You chose to take that journey even though you were terrified. I chose to help you, even though I had no obligation. We kept choosing each other over and over until those choices built a life. So maybe fate brought us to the same place, but we built everything else." "I like that," Grace said. "It makes us more than just lucky. It makes us intentional." "We were definitely intentional," Cole agreed, pulling her close. and I intend to keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life. The 1890s brought new changes. Virginia City continued to decline as the mines played out, but Grace and Cole's businesses remained stable. They were established enough, respected enough, that people sought them out specifically. The boarding house became more of a hotel, catering to businessmen and travelers rather than just miners. Cole's carpentry expanded into general contracting, building houses and commercial structures. Thomas left for university in Boston in 1893, 16 years old and brilliant, determined to study engineering. His departure was hard on everyone, especially Sarah, who had always looked up to her older brother despite their differences. But there was also pride in watching him go, knowing they had given him opportunities that would have been impossible if Grace had not taken that desperate journey north so many years ago. Sarah, at 11, threw herself into helping with the family businesses. She had a natural talent for organization and could charm even the most difficult customers. Grace began teaching her bookkeeping and management, recognizing that Sarah might be the one to eventually take over the boarding house. In 1895, Cole's brother Joseph appeared in Virginia City, tracking down his younger sibling after years of separation. Joseph was a lawyer in San Francisco, successful and sophisticated, and the reunion was bittersweet. The two men had little in common anymore, their lives having diverged so completely. But Joseph's visit reconnected Cole with his surviving family, establishing correspondence that would continue for years. Grace's relationship with her own brother remained close. Michael and Catherine's restaurant prospered, and Emma grew into a lovely young woman who, as predicted, had captured Thomas's heart. When Thomas returned from university in 1897 with his engineering degree, he immediately proposed to Emma. The wedding that summer was a grand affair, uniting two families who had already been close for years. Thomas and Emma settled in Denver, where Thomas had secured a position with a firm designing water systems for the rapidly growing city. Grace missed him terribly, but was glad he had found happiness and success. Sarah, now 15, took his departure as her cue to fully commit to the family business, learning everything she could from both her parents. In 1898, Cole fell from a ladder while working on a construction project. He broke his arm badly and cracked several ribs. For a man who had always been physically capable, the injury was devastating. Grace nursed him through the painful recovery, holding him when he raged against his body's limitations, encouraging him when he wanted to give up. "I am getting old," Cole said bitterly one evening, his arm still in its splint. "I cannot do the things I used to do." "You are 45, not 90, Grace pointed out. "Your body needs time to heal, give it that time." "What if I cannot work the way I used to? What if I become useless?" Grace took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Cole Quinlan, you listen to me. Your value has never been in what you can build with your hands. It is in your mind, your heart, your character. You could lose both arms and you would still be the man I love, the man I chose." "Do you understand?" Cole nodded, tears in his eyes. "I understand, thank you." He healed slowly but completely, eventually returning to work. But the incident had shaken him, made him realize he could not work with the same intensity forever. He began training his employees more seriously, preparing to step back from the day-to-day operations. As the new century approached, Grace and Cole found themselves in an unfamiliar position, looking toward retirement. They were both in their mid-40s, healthy despite Cole's injury, with enough money saved that they did not need to work constantly. Sarah was 20 and fully capable of running the boarding house. Cole's business had reliable managers. "We could travel," Cole suggested one evening. See the places we have only heard about. Visit Thomas and Emma in Denver, see San Francisco, maybe even go back east. Or we could stay here, Grace countered. In the place we built with our friends and family doing the work we love, just less of it. Both options sound good to me, Cole said. As long as we are together. They compromised, maintaining their businesses but hiring more help, giving themselves time to travel and explore. In the summer of 1900, they took a long trip, visiting Thomas and Emma in Denver and meeting their new grandson, Michael Thomas Quinlan. Grace cried when she held the baby, overwhelmed by the fullness of her life. She had gone from a destitute widow to a grandmother, from traveling north in terror to owning a successful business, from believing her life was over to having more happiness than she had ever imagined possible. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked as they stood on Thomas and Emma's front porch, watching the sun set over Denver's growing skyline. "I am thinking about that riverboat," Grace said. "About a cold winter evening when a cowboy deckhand said he knew where north led. You were right, you know. You did know. North led to all of this, to a life I could never have dreamed of on my own." "North led to you," Cole corrected gently. "Everything else is just details." They returned to Virginia City that fall, ready to settle into a quieter life. Sarah was engaged to a young lawyer named Benjamin Foster, who had moved to town the previous year. The wedding was planned for spring, and Grace threw herself into preparations, enjoying the role of mother of the bride. In 1902, Sarah and Benjamin took over full operation of the boarding house, with Grace and Cole stepping back to advisory roles. Cole officially retired from contracting, though he still occasionally took on small projects that interested him. They were 50 and 47 respectively, still vigorous but content to let the younger generation take the lead. Thomas and Emma had a second child in 1903, a daughter named Grace Catherine. The honor of having her granddaughter bear her name touched Grace deeply. She and Cole began spending several months each year in Denver, reveling in their role as grandparents, spoiling the children and telling them stories of the old days. In 1905, Michael passed away suddenly from a heart attack. The loss hit Grace hard, reminding her that time was precious and finite. She clung to Cole, grateful for every day they had together, determined not to take their happiness for granted. Catherine moved in with Sarah and Benjamin after Michael's death, helping with the boarding house and finding purpose in work. Emma, bereft at losing her stepfather, spent the summer in Virginia City, bringing Thomas and the children. The family gathered, supporting each other through grief, reminded of the bonds that held them together. As the years continued to pass, Grace and Cole watched their family grow and flourish. Thomas became a prominent engineer, designing systems that brought water to thousands of people. Sarah and Benjamin expanded the boarding house into a proper hotel, one of the finest in Montana. The grandchildren grew, smart and healthy and full of potential. Grace and Cole grew old together, their love deepening into something comfortable and enduring. They could communicate with a glance, finish each other's sentences, work together in comfortable silence. Their hair turned gray, their bodies slowed, but their affection never wavered. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1909, Cole surprised Grace with a trip back to Council Bluffs. They retraced their journey, taking the train this time instead of a supply wagon, staying in comfortable hotels instead of camping in the snow. They visited Mrs. Patterson's old boarding house, now run by her daughter. They saw the dock where the Northern Star had landed, now expanded and modernized. 30 years, Grace marveled as they stood at the riverbank, watching boats pass. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes like a lifetime ago. "Both probably," Cole said. Time is strange that way. Do you have any regrets? Cole turned to look at her, his brown eyes still warm despite the lines around them. Not a single one. You. Only that I did not meet you sooner, Grace admitted. That we did not have even more time together. We have now, Cole reminded her. We have today and hopefully tomorrow and however many days we are granted. Let us make them count. They returned to Virginia City renewed, grateful, determined to savor their remaining time. Cole took up woodcarving, creating beautiful pieces that he gave to family and friends. Grace began writing down their story, wanting her grandchildren to know how their family began, how love and courage and determination had built something lasting from nothing. In 1912, as they sat on their porch watching another sunset, Cole took Grace's hand. They were 59 and 56, their children grown, their grandchildren thriving, their life's work complete. I love you, Cole said simply. I have loved you since that frozen riverboat deck, and I will love you until my last breath. I love you too, Grace replied, squeezing his hand. Thank you for taking a chance on a desperate widow. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for letting me, Cole said. You were brave enough to head north in winter, to trust a stranger, to risk everything for a chance at survival. That bravery changed my life. They sat together as the stars emerged, as they had done thousands of times before. The boarding house behind them was full of guests. Their family was healthy and happy, their legacy secure. A riverboat had carried one woman north in winter. A cowboy deckhand had known where that journey would lead, and together they had created a love story that would echo through generations. It was not the life Grace had imagined when she left St. Louis, terrified and alone. It was better, richer, fuller than any dream. And as she sat beside her husband, watching the sky darken over the mountains they had made their home, Grace knew that every hardship, every moment of fear, every difficult choice had been worth it. They had chosen each other, chosen love, chosen to build rather than surrender. And that choice, made on a frozen riverboat deck so many years ago, had made all the difference. Years continued to unfold gently for Grace and Cole. In 1914, their first great-grandchild was born, a boy named Cole Michael, Thomas and Emma's grandson. Holding the tiny infant, Cole wept openly, overwhelmed by the fullness of his legacy. When I was young, drifting from job to job, I never imagined this, he told Grace that night. A family, generations bearing our names, carrying forward the values we tried to instill. We built something good, Grace agreed. Something that will last long after we are gone. In 1916, Sarah and Benjamin's son Jonathan took over management of the hotel, now called the Quinlan House, a name that carried weight and respect throughout Montana. Jonathan had inherited his grandfather's practical skills and his grandmother's business sense, expanding the operation to include a restaurant and meeting facilities. The family business was in capable hands for another generation. Cole's health began to decline slowly in 1917. Nothing dramatic, just the gradual wearing down of a body that had worked hard for 7 decades. He moved more slowly, tired more easily, sometimes forgot things that had once been clear. Grace cared for him patiently as he had cared for her through her pregnancies and illnesses, their love expressed in small daily acts of service. I am sorry, Cole said one morning as Grace helped him dress. I hate being a burden. You are not a burden, Grace said firmly. You are my husband, my partner, my love. Taking care of you is not a burden, it is a privilege. Even when I forget things, even when I am difficult, even then. Cole, you have given me 40 years of love and support. If I can give you comfort in return, that is the least I can do. Thomas and Emma moved back to Virginia City in 1918. Thomas taking a position designing mining safety systems. Having their son nearby again brought Grace tremendous joy. The family gathered frequently, multiple generations sharing meals and stories, the younger ones learning about the old days, the courage and determination it had taken to build their lives in this harsh, beautiful country. In the autumn of 1919, Cole suffered a stroke. It was not severe, but it left him weakened, confined mostly to a wheelchair. His mind remained sharp, which he said was both a blessing and a curse. He could think clearly but could not act on his thoughts, dependent on others in a way he had never been before. Grace moved their bedroom downstairs in the small house they had built for themselves behind the hotel. She arranged everything for Cole's comfort, installing a large window so he could watch the mountains he loved. Family visited daily, grandchildren climbing into his lap to hear stories, great-grandchildren playing at his feet. "I am ready," Cole told Grace one evening in early December as the first snow of winter began to fall. "When the time comes, I am ready." "I am not," Grace said, tears streaming down her face. "I will never be ready to lose you." "You will not lose me," Cole said gently, taking her hand with his one still strong grip. "I will be with you in the hotel we built, in our children and grandchildren, in every sunset you watch from this window. Death ends a life, Grace, not a relationship." She climbed into the chair beside him, something she had been doing more often lately, needing the physical closeness. They sat together watching the snow fall, white and clean and beautiful. "I would do it all again," Grace said softly. "Every moment, every hardship, every joy, all of it." "So would I," Cole replied. "Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." Cole Quinlan died peacefully in his sleep on December 20th, 1919. He was 66 years old, surrounded by family, his hand in Grace's. The funeral was one of the largest Virginia City had ever seen, a testament to the respect and affection the community felt for him. Men he had trained spoke of his skill and integrity. Business partners praised his honesty. His children and grandchildren shared memories of his kindness, his humor, his steadfast love. Grace stood dry-eyed through the service, her grief too deep for public tears. But that night, alone in the house they had shared, she wept until she had no tears left. 41 years of marriage, of partnership, of love, ended. She was 64 years old and a widow for the second time, but this loss cut deeper than any wound she had ever endured. The family rallied around her. Sarah insisted she move into the hotel where she would not be alone. Thomas visited daily, bringing his grandchildren to distract her. Emma cooked her favorite foods, trying to tempt her appetite. Catherine, herself a widow, understood her grief in a way others could not, sitting with her in companionable silence when words were inadequate. Slowly, painfully, Grace began to heal. She found purpose in her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the family Cole had helped her build. She completed the memoir she had been writing, the story of their journey from that cold riverboat deck to the life they had created, wanting future generations to know their history. On warm evenings, Grace sat on the hotel porch, watching the sunset over the mountains, remembering the thousands of times she and Cole had done the same. She spoke to him sometimes, sharing news about the family, asking his opinion on decisions she faced. She knew he could not answer, but the ritual brought her comfort. In 1923, Grace became great-great-grandmother when Jonathan's daughter Hannah had a son. Holding the tiny baby, 4 generations removed from herself and Cole, Grace marveled at the web of connections they had created. This child would never know Cole, would know Grace herself only through stories, but he was part of their legacy nonetheless. Grace lived to be 80 years old, remaining sharp and engaged until the end. She died peacefully in the spring of 1936, surrounded by family in the hotel she and Cole had built. Her last words were, "I am coming, Cole. Wait for me." The funeral was attended by hundreds. The Quinlan house closed for the day, its flags at half-mast, honoring the woman who had helped create it. 4 generations of family mourned her, sharing stories of her strength, her kindness, her unwavering love for the husband she had met on a frozen riverboat so many years before. They buried Grace beside Cole in the Virginia City Cemetery on a hillside overlooking the mountains. The stone was simple: Grace Jensen Quinlan, 1855–1936, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, together forever. The Quinlan house continued to operate, passed down through generations, always maintained to the high standards Grace had established. The story of Grace and Cole's meeting, their courage in facing winter's journey, their building of a life from nothing, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. Thomas and Emma's great-grandson, researching family history in the 1980s, found Grace's memoir tucked away in an attic trunk. He had it published by a small press, a love story set against the backdrop of the American West, a testament to courage and determination, and the power of choosing love even in the darkest times. The boarding house where it all began still stands in Virginia City, converted now to a museum. A plaque tells the story. Grace and Cole Quinlan built this establishment in 1879, creating one of Montana's finest hotels. Their love story began on a riverboat traveling north in winter, when a cowboy deckhand helped a desperate widow reach safety. Together they built a legacy of service, integrity, and family that continues today. Visitors walk through the restored rooms, seeing the furniture Cole crafted, the kitchen where Grace cooked thousands of meals, the porch where they watched countless sunsets together. Some feel the presence of the past, the echo of lives well lived, of love that transcended hardship to build something lasting. The mountains still stand, eternal and beautiful. The rivers still flow, carrying boats north and south. And somewhere in the fabric of time, a young widow stands on a frozen deck while a cowboy deckhand approaches and says, "I know where north leads you," beginning a love story that would echo through generations, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and choosing love in the face of fear. Their story had ended, but their legacy lived on, woven into the land they had loved, the family they had created, the values they had lived. A riverboat had carried one woman north in winter. A cowboy had known where that journey would lead. And together, they had created something that would last forever. Not just a building or a business, but a love that transcended time, that inspired descendants they would never meet, that proved the enduring power of choosing hope over despair, connection over isolation, love over fear. And that, in the end, was the greatest legacy of all.